The slave markets smelled of smoke, sweat, and sorrow. It was a dark corner of the alien city, where hope died quietly and pain was sold in chains. Buyers walked proudly, inspecting the weak, broken, and helpless as if they were meat on display. But near the edge of the platform stood someone different. An alien mother, trembling, holding her skinny child close to her chest. Her name was Sira. Her skin was pale blue, marked with bruises and dirt. Her eyes were tired, but sharp, like someone who had already lost too much and had nothing left to lose. The child in her arms, barely breathing, had purple stains on her lips and hollowed cheeks. She was sick, starving, and growing colder by the minute. Sira whispered something into her daughter's ear, kissed her forehead, then slowly placed her on a dirty cloth by the auction block. She stood tall and raised her voice. "I offer myself," she said, "in exchange for food and medicine for my daughter." The crowd laughed. "She's nothing but bones." Someone shouted, "Who'd want a broken female with a dying brat?" Another sneered, but Sira didn't flinch. She stared straight ahead. Even as tears rolled down her cheeks, no one stepped forward. No one made an offer. Minutes passed, and her daughter began to cough weakly. Sira looked back, panic in her eyes. That's when a tall man in a brown coat walked through the crowd. He was human. Everyone noticed him instantly. A rare sight in these parts, humans didn't usually come to this place. He had short black hair, a scar over his left brow, and a steady gaze that scanned the auction like a soldier checking a battlefield. His name was Jack. No one knew why. He was here, but he walked straight to Sarah and stopped in front of her. Silence fell. Jack looked at her, then at the child. He said nothing. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Unsure. You want to make a bid?" Jack pulled out a sealed ration pack, a water bottle, and a silver med card. "I'll trade these," he said calmly, "for both the mother and her daughter." The crowd murmured, confused. "This isn't how it works," the auctioneer said. "She's not even registered," and the child Jack stared at him coldly. "Take it or leave it," he said. The auctioneer looked around, then nodded quickly. The items were too valuable to pass up. Sira stood frozen, not understanding. She had expected chains, whips, commands, maybe worse. Instead, the man crouched and wrapped her daughter in his own coat. Then he helped Sira down from the platform gently, as if she was a person, not property. "Why?" she asked in a whisper. Jack didn't answer. He simply said, "Let's get her warm first." He carried the child in one arm and led Sira away from the market. Everyone stared as they walked away. Some laughed, some spat, some looked confused. But no one dared follow. There was something in the way the human moved to silent warning. A man who had seen war and had nothing to prove. He took them through narrow back alleys to a small shelter hidden behind an old mechanic's shop. Inside was warmth, light, and quiet. He laid the child on a thin mattress, handed Sarah a clean cloth, and said, "There's food in the box. Water by the wall." Sarah didn't move. She was still waiting for the trick, the blow, the demand. But Jack just sat near the door, watching, guarding. The child moaned softly, then drank from the bottle Jack gave her. Sira broke down in tears, falling to her knees. "I have nothing to give," she said in a broken voice. "I can't pay you back." Jack looked at her with tired eyes and said, "You don't have to." Sarah didn't understand. In her world, kindness was a mask before cruelty, but in Jack's voice, there was no hunger, no desire, no hidden meaning, just a simple truth he had bought her not to own but to save. That night, while her daughter slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Sira sat beside this strange human, silently watching him. He didn't touch her, didn't speak much. He just made sure the door was locked and the heater stayed on, and as the stars blinked above the alien city, a mother who had lost everything began to feel something again. Not fear, not shame, but the tiniest spark of safety. Sarah woke up to warmth. That alone felt strange. For so many months, maybe years, she had only known cold floors, metal chains, and hunger. But now, as she opened her eyes, she found herself on a soft mattress with a blanket covering her and her child. The little one still slept, face peaceful for the first time in days. It wasn't a dream. The human Jack had really taken them in. She sat up slowly, looking. Around the room, the walls were made of scrap metal and old wood, but they were solid. There was a working heater, a small table, and shelves filled with food packets and medical supplies. Jack was sitting at the corner of the room, eyes half closed, holding a warm mug in his hands. He looked up when she moved. "You're awake," he said simply, then handed her a cup of hot water. Sarah stared at it, unsure what to do. "Drink," he added. "Oh, you're safe here." Those words, "you're safe," didn't make sense to her. Safety didn't exist in her world. But the warmth of the water in her hands and the quietness in the room felt too real to ignore. She took a small sip, then another. The taste was plain, but it was clean, real, and it didn't burn her throat. Sarah stood slowly, keeping one hand on her daughter. "I'll clean this place," she said softly, "and cook too." Jack shook his head. "You don't need to do anything." She looked confused. Then, "What do you want from me?" His reply came quickly. Nothing. That scared her more than a slap. Nothing. No one did something for nothing. Even those who smiled before always showed their claws later. Jack stood up and walked to the shelf. Pulling out a few packets, he opened one and set food for the child beside the bed. Then he looked at Sarah and asked, "She has a name?" Sarah hesitated, then whispered, "Luma, pretty name," Jack said, placing a toy beside the food. A soft, human-made creature with long ears and bright colors. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Luma's small fingers twitched in her sleep, and when she woke up moments later, her eyes locked on the toy. Her weak arms reached for it, and she smiled, tiny, pure smile. Sarah covered her mouth to stop herself from crying. Luma hadn't smiled in weeks, maybe longer. Jack crouched beside the child and handed her a soft spoon. "She'll eat when she's ready," he said, then turned away to give them space. That evening, Sarah walked around the shelter, trying to understand. It was small but neat. There were blankets for the floor, soft lights, and pictures on the walls. Photos of other humans, some smiling, some in uniforms, all looking strong and kind. She noticed a photo of Jack, in armor, standing with other soldiers. His arm was around a young woman. And there was a little boy in front of them. Sarah didn't ask, but she guessed he had once had a family. Maybe that's why he cared. When night came, Sarah offered to sleep on the floor. Jack refused, handing her another blanket. "I'll be outside the door," he said. "You two sleep in peace." She didn't understand him. Why sleep outside when he had a roof, a room, a bed? Still, she said nothing and lay beside her daughter for the first time in ages. Sarah closed her eyes without fear of someone dragging her away in the night. And in that silence, under the soft hum of the heater, she dreamed not of pain, but of her child laughing again someday. The next morning, Jack came in with fruit. Real fruit. Not the dry flakes she was used to. He washed it, cut it, and offered it to Luma first. Sarah watched as her daughter held the food with both hands, her little face lighting up. The human just smiled and poured water into a clean cup. That day, Sarah tried again. "Please," she said. "I want to help." Jack sighed, then finally nodded. "All right," he said, "but only if you want to, not because you feel you must." So she cleaned the dishes, folded the blankets, and sorted the supplies. It felt strange to work without fear of being hit or yelled at. She did it quietly, but with purpose. Jack didn't hover, didn't control, he simply let her be. Later, They sat near the small stove, watching Luma play with her new toy. Sira spoke quietly. "I thought you'd take me for yourself." Jack didn't look at her, but his voice was calm. "I didn't take you at all," he said. "I offered safety, not ownership." Sira looked at him closely, trying to find the lie in his words, but there was none. This human was not like others. Not like the aliens who beat her, or the traitors who saw her as a tool. He was different kind in a way that scared her, 'cause she didn't know how to handle it that night while the stars blinked outside the window. Sira whispered to herself, "Why did he choose me?" She had no answer, but her heart, still cracked and bleeding, felt something it hadn't in a long time. A small, unfamiliar warmth that might one day grow into trust. The morning was quiet. Only the soft hum of the heater and the quiet breathing of a sleeping child filled the small shelter. Sira sat near the edge of the bed, holding Luma's tiny hand. Her fingers brushed against her daughter's soft skin. Now, warmer, stronger than before, she knew the worst had passed for now. Jack stood at the small stove, boiling water. He didn't speak, didn't push for conversation, but his silence was never cold. It was a gentle kind of silence, like the kind that let wounds breathe. Sira appreciated it, even if she didn't say so out loud. Still, something heavy lived inside her, a shadow that hadn't left. Not even in safety, she felt it growing, pressing against her chest, and finally, she spoke. "I was taken when I was 15, she said softly. Jack turned slightly but didn't interrupt. "They came during the night," she continued, "burned the village. Took the young ones." Her eyes stayed on the floor. "My father tried to stop them. They shot him." She blinked slowly. "My mother begged." "They took her to." Sira paused, waiting for judgment, for pity. But Jack only poured hot water into a metal cup and placed it on the table beside her. She looked up, surprised. No questions, no soft words, no fake comfort, only a warm drink. Offered without a word, she continued. "They trained us," she said. "Not to fight, but to serve." Her voice broke. But she pushed through it. "Every day we were tested how well we obeyed, how fast we learned to smile. Even when it hurt." Jack sat across from her, his eyes calm, listening. She was grateful for that. "I tried to escape once," she said, her voice quieter now. "They found me, punished me, then sold me again." She clenched her fists. "Each time I was sold, I lost more of myself." Jack finally spoke. "How did you keep going?" Sira looked at him, surprised. She had expected the usual questions. How many owners? How long? How bad was it? But this question was different. She thought for a moment, then answered, "Luma. I didn't know I was pregnant when I escaped the last time," she explained. "I hid in an old factory, gave birth alone." Her eyes filled with tears. She was small, quiet, like she didn't want to disturb the world. Jack didn't say anything, but his gaze softened. He understood more than most. She could tell. "What about you?" she asked gently. "Your family?" The photo on the wall, Jack's eyes shifted toward the shelf. He didn't smile, but he nodded slowly. "My wife and son," he said. "They were on a colony world-neutral zone." He paused. A skirmish broke out. No warning. He didn't need to say more. Sira saw it in his eyes. Silence returned. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was shared. Two people carrying invisible scars, now slowly opening the bandages. "I joined the Peace Corps after that," Jack said. "I couldn't stop what happened to them, but maybe I could stop it from happening to someone else." Sira blinked. "So you came here to buy slaves?" Jack shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "I came for someone who was still human, even if the world had forgotten." Sira looked down, feeling something strange. It wasn't shame this time. It was something warmer. Something like being seen. Later that afternoon, Luma giggled while playing with the soft toy Jack had given her. Her little hand smacked it across the blanket and then clapped in delight. Sierra laughed, a real laugh that surprised even her. Jack looked up from the corner and smiled slightly. "That's the best sound I've heard in weeks," he said. Sierra felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to compliments sexually, not ones that had nothing to do with her body. She touched her hair and whispered, "Thank you." Jack stood and handed her a folded shirt. "It's clean," he said. "Might be more comfortable than the rags they gave you." Sierra took it carefully, feeling the soft human fabric in her hands. It smelled like sunlight and soap. She turned to change, but paused. "Why are you really helping us?" she asked, unable to stop the question from escaping. Jack looked straight at her and answered quietly, "Because someone should. Have helped my wife and son, because no one did, and because I think kindness shouldn't need a reason." Sierra didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. But when she changed into the shirt and looked into the cracked mirror, she didn't see a slave. She saw someone beginning to come back to life. That night, while the stars blinked high above, Jack stayed outside the shelter. Watching the street quietly, Sierra sat inside, her daughter curled up beside her. She whispered a quiet promise to herself, "No matter what happens, I'll become someone who can stand again, and for the first time in a long, long time." She believed it might be possible. The next morning started quietly. Sierra was folding a warm blanket when Jack stepped out to check the solar panel wires. On the roof, Luma was humming softly, playing with her favorite toy, the one with long ears and smiling eyes. The small shelter felt more like a home than it ever had before. For a moment, everything seemed calm. Then came the knock, hard, loud, and sharp. 3 quick bangs on the metal door. Sierra froze. Her heart dropped instantly. Jack wasn't inside. She looked around quickly and grabbed Luma, pulling her close. The knocking came again. This time with a voice, "Open the door." By order of sector security, her breath quickened. No one just knocked and asked politely in this part of the colony. She backed into the far corner of the room, shielding her daughter with her body. She didn't know what to do. The door opened. Suddenly, Jack stepped in, calm and collected. He had a wrench in his hand, wiping off dust. He saw Sierra's face and immediately understood something was wrong. Another knock, more aggressive this time. Jack placed the wrench down and walked to the door slowly. He opened it, revealing 2 alien patrol guards, dressed in black armor with red glowing emblems on their chests. Their eyes were cold, mechanical. One held a scanner. The other had a stun baton strapped to his side. "We have reason to believe you're harboring a fugitive," the first guard said sharply. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Female slave," the guard answered. "And her offspring?" Jack didn't flinch. He stepped outside and closed the door gently behind him. "Who gave you that information?" he asked, his voice flat. The guards looked at each other, then back at Jack. "We received an anonymous tip," one replied. "Not your concern." Jack crossed his arms. "Well, I am a registered citizen of the United Human Coalition," he said. "And you're standing on private property." The guard sneered. "Property or not. If there's a slave here, we're authorized to retrieve her." Jack smiled faintly. "Interesting," he said. "Because according to this document," he pulled a folded paper from his coat, "the woman and child in question were purchased legally and registered under UHC protection." He held the document in front of them. The guards scanned it, their expressions darkening. "I suggest you leave," Jack said quietly. "You're about to violate human territory rights." Inside, Sierra was holding her breath. She could barely hear the words, but she could feel the tension. She rocked Luma gently, trying to calm both of them. Outside, the guards gritted their teeth. "Fine," one said, stepping back, "but if we find out she's been moving without permission, we'll be back." Jack didn't respond. He just stood there, watching them until they walked away. Then he locked the door and turned around. Sierra was still in the corner, trembling. He walked over slowly and crouched in front of her. "There?" "Gone," he said softly. "It's okay now." She didn't answer. Her arms were tight around her daughter. Her breathing was heavy, sharp, like she was holding back a scream. "I thought they were going to take her," she finally whispered. I thought this was over." Jack shook his head. "They're cowards." He said, "All bark, no bite when faced with law." He sat beside her. "I'll file a complaint to the coalition office. What they did was illegal." Sierra looked at him with wide eyes. "You face them without fear," she said. Jack looked at her gently. "I've seen real monsters," he replied. "Those two. Just bullies in fancy suits." Sierra let out a weak laugh, but her voice shook. "You could have handed me over," she said. "No one would blame you." Jack tilted his head. "Do you really think I brought you here to throw you away later?" "I didn't take you in to protect your body," he added. "I took you in to protect your dignity." Tears filled her eyes. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like this, not even before she was taken. She wiped her eyes quickly, ashamed of the tears. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder for just a moment, light, respectful. "Whatever comes next," he said. "We'll face it together." That night, Sierra barely slept. She lay beside her daughter, watching the ceiling. Her mind played old memories like broken films. The cages, the beatings, the cold hands dragging her by the hair, and then Jack's voice cutting through it all. "You're safe now." She turned and looked at Luma, now resting peacefully with a full belly and soft blankets. Maybe this wasn't just a break from pain. Maybe it was the start of something real, and just outside. Jack kept watch under the moonlight, a quiet guardian in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. The morning sun slipped through the small window of the shelter. Golden light touched the walls, warming the floor where Luma sat playing with her toy. Sierra smiled as she folded clean fabric and glanced over at her daughter. For once, things felt peaceful. But peace, she had learned, never lasted long. It began with a cough. Just a tiny one, soft and harmless. Sarah paused, looked at Luma, then went back to work. Children cough all the time, she told herself. But then came another, louder this time, and followed by a shiver. By afternoon, Luma had stopped playing. She lay on the mattress, eyes half open, skin pale and damp. Sierra's heart dropped. She rushed over, touching her forehead, was burning. The little girl whimpered in her sleep, her small fingers twitching weakly. Panic rose in Sierra's chest like a wave. "No, no, not now," she whispered. "Please, not now." Jack entered moments later, holding supplies from the local outpost. One look at Sierra's face told him something was wrong. "She's burning," Sierra said, her voice cracking. Jack was at the bedside in seconds. He placed his hand on the child's head, then gently checked her breathing. "Too fast, too shallow. She needs help," he said quickly. Now Sierra followed him out the door, cradling Luma in her arms. Jack led them through narrow alleys and side streets, away from patrol routes. They stopped at a hidden metal door painted to look like a wall. Jack knocked 3 times. Then twice more. A small eye slot opened, and a voice asked, "Who is it?" "Jack," he said. "I need a favor." The door opened, revealing an older alien woman with silver tattoos on her face. Her name was Mira, a retired medic who owed Jack more than one favor from years past. She saw the child and didn't ask questions. "Put her on the table," she said, moving fast, inside the backroom clinic. The lights were dim, but the equipment was real. Myra scanned Luma and read the data, her expression growing tense. "Severe respiratory infection," she said, "and signs of internal weakness." Sierra held her breath, gripping Jack's arm. "Will she make it?" Myra looked up, serious but calm. She needs treatment now. It'll be expensive and not safe. There are people watching you. Jack, she added. I don't care, Jack said, without hesitation. Do it. Myra nodded, rushing to mix a set of glowing serums. Sierra stepped back as they worked, her legs weak, her heart pounding. She whispered to herself over and over, "Stay with me, Luma. Stay with me." An hour passed. Jack stood like a statue while Mira moved like a shadow. Sierra sat in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees. The world had shrunk down to the sound of beeping monitors and Luma's shallow breaths. Finally, Mira stepped back. "The medicine is in," she said. "Now she just needs rest." Sierra jumped to her feet. Rushing over to her daughter, Luma was sleeping, her color slightly better. Her body no longer shaking. "She's going to be okay," Mira confirmed, "but she'll need food, clean air, and time." Sierra nodded quickly, brushing the hair from Luma's forehead. "I'll take care of her," she whispered, tears falling freely. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. "She's safe now," he said. Later that night, they returned to the shelter. Jack carried Luma, wrapped in soft fabric. Sierra followed close behind, holding Mira's instructions and the small bag of medicine. Inside, Jack carefully placed Luma back onto the mattress. Adjusting the blanket around her, Sierra sat beside her daughter, not moving. Her eyes stayed locked on the small chest, rising and falling. Jack knelt beside her and said, "I used everything I had left." Sierra looked at him, shocked. "The credits, the trade goods, the protection papers," he continued. "I used it all to get her that medicine." "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You owe me nothing." Jack looked her in the eyes and replied, "You're right. I don't owe you anything. But she's just a child," he said, "and you're her mother, and no one else was going to save her." Sierra tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, she leaned forward and touched her forehead to Jack's shoulder. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stayed there, steady and quiet, like the ground beneath her feet. That night, while Luma slept peacefully for the first time in days, Sierra didn't sleep. She sat beside her child, watching, thinking, remembering. Jack had no reason to care. No law, no deal, no debt, but he did. He chose to care, and in a world where people were bought and sold like broken tools, that choice meant everything. The night was still, outside the shelter. Winds whispered softly across the metal roofs. Inside, the heater buzzed quietly as it warmed the small space. Luma slept soundly, her little hands curled around her toy. Her cheeks were no longer pale, and the fever had broken. Sierra sat in silence, watching her daughter breathe. There were no more coughing fits, no more cries of pain, just soft, even breaths. And yet, Sierra couldn't sleep. Something heavy sat inside her chest. Across the room, Jack sat by the small table, reading something on his old datapad. The screen glowed softly against his face, but his eyes weren't really focused on it. He was just waiting, watching in his own quiet way. Sierra looked at him. She wanted to say thank you again, but those words felt too small. She stood, slowly, walking over with careful steps. Jack looked up as she approached. "She's okay," he said gently. Sierra nodded. "I know." She sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap. There was a long pause, filled only by the humming heater. Then, with a quiet voice, she spoke. "Can I tell you something?" Jack didn't nod, didn't interrupt. He just closed the datapad and gave her his full attention. "I wasn't always this weak," she began. "I used to be someone." Her voice trembled, but she continued. "My name is Sierra Velrahi." She said, "My family was once part of the council on El Neri, one of the oldest moons." Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. That name wasn't unknown. El Nare had been taken during the first wave of the border conflicts. Many of its people were either killed, enslaved, or scattered. My parents were proud, Zara said. My mother led the healer circle. My father worked in planetary law. They were good people, honest, strong. When the war came, they refused to leave. Her voice cracked again. They thought the council would protect us. They were wrong. She looked away, blinking fast. I was taken. The night the palace burned, I watched them drag my parents away. I heard the screams, and then silence. She clenched her fists on her lap. I was just a girl, but they treated me like a thing. They broke me, over and over. And when I had nothing left, they sold me. Jack remained still. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. He just listened with the same calm strength that had comforted her since the first day I met someone during my time on the mining colonies. She continued, he was kind, or so I believed. He promised freedom, said we'd escape together. But when I told him I was with child, he disappeared. Sira laughed, but it wasn't joyful. I was alone again, with nothing but a growing belly and too many enemies. Found a hiding place, gave birth in the dark, and held Luma for hours before I even dared to speak. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her shirt. She saved me. She gave me a reason to breathe again. But there were days I wished I didn't. Jack finally spoke. You never gave up. Sira shook her head slowly. I did, she whispered. When I walked into that slave market, I had already decided if no one bought me, I'd sell myself to the worst bidder. All I wanted was food for her. Her voice broke. Fully now, I didn't expect kindness. I didn't expect you. Jack leaned forward slightly. I didn't know your story, he said. I just saw a mother willing to give up everything for her child. That was enough. Sira looked up, her eyes wet but steady. You gave me more than food, more than shelter. You gave me something I thought I'd never have again. She paused, her voice quiet but full. You gave me dignity. Jack's expression softened. He reached across the table, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. His hand rested gently over hers. I didn't save you, Sira, he said. You saved yourself. I was just lucky enough to witness it. They sat there for a long time, saying nothing more. The silence was different, now not heavy, not full of fear. It was a silence filled with understanding, respect, and the beginning of something fragile and real. Sira finally stood, walking back to her daughter's side. She tucked Luma in gently, then turned to Jack one last time. You should sleep, she said with a small smile. Jack nodded, but he kept watching her like he always did. And as the night grew deeper and colder outside, the little shelter stayed warm, not just from heaters or blankets, but from two broken souls learning how to heal together. Weeks passed. The cold nights began to feel warmer. Even when the heater wasn't running, Luma was laughing again, stronger with every step she took across the shelter floor. Sira smiled more now, her eyes softer, her hands steadier, but there was still something unfinished between her and Jack, something neither of them had spoken out loud. One morning, after feeding Luma, Sira stepped outside. The sun was rising above the rooftops, painting the sky with orange and gold. Jack was there, sitting quietly on the edge of a metal crate, sipping from his old mug. He turned as she approached. Nodding once in his quiet way, Sira sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. They watched the light together for a moment. Then she took a deep breath. Do you ever wonder what comes next? She asked. Jack looked straight ahead. All the time, he answered. Before I met you, I didn't know if I even had a next. He looked at her slowly. But now? I do. Sira's heart beat faster. She had heard many words in her life, commands, lies, threats, but these were different. Real, slow, gentle words. She turned to face him. I've been many things, she said, a council daughter, a prisoner, a slave, a mother. But I never thought I'd be free. Jack didn't interrupt. Sierra continued. I thought survival was the end of the road, but maybe it's just the beginning. Jack set down his mug. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver band, simple and unpolished. I had this made a few days ago, he said. It's not valuable. Not official, but it's a promise. Sierra's eyes widened. What kind of promise? Jack stood slowly, offering the ring in both hands. That you'll never be treated like a thing again, he said. That you'll never feel alone again. That Luma will grow up with love and safety, and that, if you choose it, you can build a new life with me. Sierra stared at him, silent tears gathering in her eyes. No one's ever asked me, she whispered. They just took. Jack's voice was steady. I'm not taking anything. He said, I'm offering Sierra. Stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached for the ring. She didn't care about wealth, beauty, or ceremonies. She cared about the man who gave her child food without asking, who stood up to guards without fear, who slept outside so she could feel safe inside. She took the ring, held it tightly, and looked him in the eyes. I say yes, she said softly. Not because I need saving, but because I want to stand beside someone who chose love in a world full of cruelty. Jack smiled, not a wide grin, but a quiet, peaceful smile. He reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. They stood there together, silent, while the city slowly woke up behind them. Later that evening, they cooked together for the first time. Luma sat at the table giggling, eating bits of food as Jack made silly faces at her. Sierra watched, laughing quietly, her heart full in a way she never thought possible again. This wasn't a dream, which was real. The next day, Jack filed the papers. Not for ownership, but for citizenship rights. Sierra and Luma were now protected under human law as family, not property. Mira visited and brought more supplies, even a small necklace for Luma. The shelter grew busier, warmer, filled with tiny signs of life. A drawing on the wall made by Luma, a new mattress for the child, an extra pillow beside Sierra's, a second mug on Jack's morning crate. People nearby began to notice. Some whispered about the human and his alien family, but Jack didn't care, and Sierra didn't hide anymore. One night, Sierra stood outside under the stars. She looked up at the sky and thought of her parents, of the little girl she used to be, of the woman she had become. She whispered into the night, I'm still here, and now I'm whole. Jack stepped up beside her, placing a warm blanket around her shoulders. She leaned against him without hesitation, not as a broken creature needing shelter, but as a woman standing proud and free. And in that moment, beneath the stars of a once cruel galaxy, an alien mother who had once been sold for scraps stood hand in hand with a human who had nothing left to give except love. They had found something stronger than survival. They had found home.